You know, I think it's really great that they made another Power Rangers movie. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today our movie in the middle is Eternals. Eternals is the newest MCU movie introducing 10 new superheroes who have been protectors of the universe since almost the beginning of time. It stars Richard Madden, Don Lee, Gemma Chan, Kumail Nanjiani, Leah McHugh, Lauren Ridloff, Barry Keoghan, Brian Tyree Henry, Angelina Jolie, Kit Harrington, and Salma Hayek. And it is also directed by Chloe Zhao, who did Nomadland and won this year for Best Director. Eternals has probably been the most polarizing MCU movie yet, which is really saying a lot considering a lot of them have had not mixed reviews, but some people felt very strongly one way or another about some of the MCU movies. It is currently sitting on Rotten Tomatoes at a 48%. That is way lower than any of the others. Which for me is kind of weird because I still think that Thor the Dark World and even The Incredible Hulk are not as good as this. Starting off with the highs, of course, the visuals. Kind of like Dune, it's like the MCU's version of just the biggest movie you could possibly have. Not in terms of like scale, I mean, I'll get to that in a second, but in terms of literally just the shots. I mean, everything is just huge. The way this movie was presented in the trailer, it just felt like it was going to be big and grand and celestial, and that's basically what it is. And I think it was really great to have Chloe Zhao direct this. It was pretty fitting because there was just something about Nomadland that I could see her doing that and then doing, if she was going to be doing an MCU movie, it being this one. I can't figure out what it is specifically. I can't put my finger on it, but you can see Chloe Zhao in this movie because she, first of all, she really loves sunlight shots. She loves silhouettes and sun and everything, and of course that was in Nomadland and that kind of golden hour or nice dusk or dawn light, and that's in this a ton. But it's also like the focus on people. So I think that's part of why. But it was really fitting that she directed this movie, and I think she did a very beautiful job with it. It's funny too because going along with the big visuals, because there's so many characters, literally every shot of them is like this big group stance. And it just sounds like, yeah, duh. But like even when it's only like three or four of them at a time, they still have that kind of like really wide, like everybody's like standing here and there's one here and one back here. It was kind of funny after a while that they just kind of kept doing that. It's also, of course, got a lot of what makes the other MCU movies really good. The action is really cool. There's a lot of really awesome scenes in this because the powers that are introduced are really interesting. Some of them we've seen before, some of them are pretty new and interesting, and the way that they all came together with them I thought was really cool, and you definitely could like feel the intensity of all their powers. It's also really funny. Like the movie itself, like most Marvel movies, is really funny. All of these characters coming together, not only being people who were alive 7,000 plus years ago, but also people who have adapted to what we do now, and seeing that modernization is really funny. I don't want to ruin what they do, but they all kind of go their separate ways for a little bit and they adapt to something within our modern society. Especially one of the characters is really funny with this ongoing quip that he does. But funny enough, out of all of these characters with all these insane powers, one of my favorites was Kit Harrington, who's just like a person. He's just a human. He was so good in this. I was really excited because I'd never seen him in anything else besides Game of Thrones, and he played like a brooding, quiet kind of character there. But in this, he was really funny, really high energy. He seemed like a regular person. He played a teacher. I thought he was really good in this, and I love him just in general. And I will say, of course, it was very interesting having Kit Harrington and Richard Madden in this movie together. There was literally a shot where they face each other and meet each other for the first time, and the entire theater that I was in just cracked up because it was like, great, it's a Stark reunion. And funny enough, it's actually like a whole Game of Thrones reunion because Raymond Djawadi, who did the score for Game of Thrones, also did the score for this, and it kind of makes sense because it's like Celestials and knights and just grand things. It makes sense that that kind of score would be in here. But the funniest thing is that there's a character named Cersei. What are the odds? I do have a middle element, and it's about the movie, but it's more so just something I want to bring up. And I'm probably not going to be able to even nail this down. But is it just me, or do you guys find it like really weird when characters who are supposedly like thousands or millions of years old not adapt to new things in society, but it just, it's hard to believe that they're that old. This is a whole like thing that I have an issue with in movies is like the concept of like skipping so much time and what took place in that amount of time, and not being able to believe that we're only at this point in our lives after a 5-year gap, like in Endgame there was that 5 years and it just felt like they should have been more progressed. I can talk about that another time. It felt weird to me that these these characters who are entire celestial beings and are protectors of the universe and have been around on Earth for 7,000 years, it just felt weird seeing them in the past because there's a lot of flashbacks in this movie to different points in history. And I don't think it's necessarily that I find it weird that they're in the present doing present stuff, because they can adapt to that, and actually it made for some very funny things. It's that when I see them in the past, then they still feel like their present selves. They feel like the people we're with now, just in the past. They don't feel like they were people who were from hundreds or thousands of years ago doing those things and then progressed to now. It just felt like they time traveled these people that we know now back to the Stone Ages or whatever. It's a really weird concept, and it might just come from the fact that I didn't feel like their origin is explained in a lot of exposition, but I didn't feel quite like it was defined where they were at the beginning emotionally. Like, were they just these android things that just did what they were told? Did they actually already have human feelings? I couldn't, because they progress to that, obviously, because we have to be attached to them. It was weird, and that could just be me. But let me know your thoughts on that. I want to make another video, just a short one talking about that, because it's just always been a weird concept to me. So that kind of gets into the lows in terms of like their definition, but I do have some other lows. The main one being, it is hard to feel attached to some of these characters for most of the movie. I will say by the second half of the movie, you know them a lot better. You are a little more emotionally invested in them, some of them more so than others. But the first half of the movie, we're going back and forth between, so many of them, and I just didn't really feel that attached to a lot of them. And it might be that they're supposed to be these, like, grand beings who don't know who we are as well, and, they're not like us for a lot of their life. But it might just be that the MCU is trying to introduce 10 whole new characters, and that's a lot of characters to introduce at once, and within half a movie get to know them really well and be attached to them. I think they do a pretty good job of it, but it was still hard for a lot of it to just be like, okay, I genuinely care what happens right now, and not just I'm being entertained by them. I will say having that many characters is kind of cool, because then you don't know what's going to happen to who, and there's just a lot of dynamics going on, but still, it's just too many of them. I also was kind of bugged by the fact that there's a few different antagonists in this movie in various forms, but the one that seems like the main one for a while kind of fades out, because it's like new antagonists come up later on, and now it's like, oh, well, we still have to deal with this. So it just kind of felt like they just wrote it off really quick, just to be like, okay, this plot line's out now. And that really kind of sucked, because the villain itself actually seemed really interesting, even if it didn't always make sense logically. It did seem cool, and it just felt like they were going to do something really interesting with it, and then we're just like, well, now we have this other thing, so we got to get rid of this one. So overall, I don't necessarily think Eternals deserves the hate that it's getting. I understand the mixed reviews. I don't think it deserves that low of a score. There are some issues with it. Just after seeing it and letting it sit for a little bit, I don't have a burning desire to go back and watch it again. And it feels a little hollow. And that sucks, because most MCU movies are ones that I'm like, I want to go see this again, because it was super entertaining, it was super fun. It's definitely worth watching, and you can even like watching it a couple times, whatever. Because it's super fun, it's funny, There's a lot of incredible action in it. It's really huge. It just feels emotionally a little empty here and there to me, which is weird because they have a lot of great emotional moments. Just overall, it just felt odd. And, it's okay. The MCU did something different. Some people liked it, some people didn't. But it wasn't what we normally get in the MCU. They tried something different. And I respect that. And it sets up a lot. I'll say that. It sets up a ton. It was like between 5 and 7 movies that they set up in this one movie. Shit ton of stuff. Especially in the post-credits scenes. It was kind of insane. I'm interested to see what they do with the heroes that we have here. I'm interested to see where it all goes because it does end on sort of a couple cliffhangers. It's the MCU. We'll see what happens. I'm going to give Eternals a 2.5 out of 4. Let me know what you thought of Eternals. I really want to know because obviously it's been a very interesting, polarizing movie, and I kind of want to know what people think because some people are like, yeah, it's totally fine. Some people are like, I didn't like it at all. And as always, keep your hopes high, your stress low, and movies right in the middle. I'll see you guys later.